A mute boy left a piece of paper on a millionaire CEO's table. What was written on it changed his world forever. November 7th, 2022, 4:12 p.m. Eastbrook Street, downtown. A cold rain fell steadily on the sidewalk. The kind that soaks through your socks and makes everything feel heavier than it should. Cars rushed by. No one stopped. People pulled their jackets tighter and looked down, just trying to get through the day. And then there was him. A little boy, standing still in front of a cafe window. No umbrella. No jacket. Just a thin birthday badge pinned to his chest. His shoes were too small. His eyes didn't blink much. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't crying. He was just waiting. Inside the cafe, everything was warm. A couple laughed over coffee. Someone played soft music on a guitar. The smell of cinnamon and baked bread filled the air. A few feet away, a man stepped out of a black Mercedes. Neat hair. Long coat. Suit with no wrinkles. Michael Hartman, tech billionaire, founder of Verexon, the man who always had somewhere to be. He walked in, ordered the same espresso he always did. Sat down with his phone like always. That boy at the window? He didn't even see him. A folded note, wet at the corners, somehow made its way to Michael's table. Nobody saw who left it. Nobody asked. Just a small piece of paper, placed carefully next to his cup. He glanced at it once, then looked away. He didn't open it. Not then. Outside, the boy still stood there. Watching. Just watching. Like he was waiting for something small. Something simple. Something the world forgot a long time ago. A hug. That was all he wanted. Michael took his coffee and left. The note stuck to his sleeve, like it was trying not to be left behind. Have you ever gone through your whole day thinking it was just another Monday, only to realize later that everything changed when you weren't even looking? This is that story of a man who had everything except one thing, and a little boy who had nothing except hope. And one note, just one note, that brought their worlds together. If this already has your heart leaning in, don't just keep it to yourself. Tap that like button, subscribe for more stories that matter, and share this with someone you care about. Because sometimes the smallest moments leave the biggest marks. Let me tell you about the tech billionaire in long coat. Michael Hartman was one of those names people knew, even if they didn't know why. You'd see his face in business magazines, hear his name mentioned on the news when the stock market moved. Billionaire. CEO. Tech genius. Built one of the biggest software companies in the country. To most people, he looked like someone who had it all: money, power, success. But what they didn't see was how quiet his life really was. Michael lived in a glass penthouse overlooking the city. It was beautiful, spotless, and cold. No photos. No mess. Not even a pair of shoes out of place. He woke up early, followed the same routine every day. Workout. Coffee. Emails. Meetings. Back-to-back calls. More meetings. The kind of schedule that leaves no room for anyone else. He didn't have a wife. No kids. No close friends. Just his assistant, who kept everything running like a machine. If Michael smiled, it was out of habit. If he laughed, no one really remembered. He moved through life like a man on a timer, efficient, sharp, untouchable. But there's something about silence. It doesn't always mean peace. Michael's life hadn't always been that way. He used to be a big brother. His younger brother, Daniel, was quiet too, not because he chose to be, but because speaking was hard for him. Doctors called it developmental delay. But Michael never cared about that. Daniel was his best friend. They did everything together. Rode bikes. Skipped rocks at the lake. Shared snacks. Watched the stars. Until the day everything changed. June 14th, 1991. They were playing near the water. Their parents were inside. Michael turned his back for one moment, just one. By the time he looked again, Daniel was gone. The dock was empty. The lake was still. That moment froze time. They found his brother hours later. But something in Michael never came back. He stopped talking about Daniel. Stopped talking, period, for a while. And when he started again, he spoke less and less about feelings, and more about numbers, patterns, systems, things he could control. That's how he lived the rest of his life. Controlled, calculated, closed off. He built a company, made billions, traveled the world. But when he came home, it was always just him. No one is waiting. No one to say goodnight. He gave to charities, especially children's hospitals and education programs, but never talked about why. He never went to the schools he helped fund, never visited the places he supported. The truth was, Michael had spent years trying to fill the hole Daniel left behind. But nothing ever did. He didn't let people in, didn't let himself feel much. And for a long time, he thought that was fine, that being alone was just part of who he was now. For the outside world, Michael Hartman was the definition of success. But behind the headlines, behind the glass walls and perfect suits, was a man who hadn't truly let anyone in for over 3 decades. He had everything, except someone to come home to. And in a life filled with numbers, control, and silence, something was quietly missing. Still, every day he kept moving. Until the day something or someone finally made him stop. If this story has already touched something in you, hit the like button, and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Thursday, November 10th, 2022. 7:26 a.m. Manhattan. It had been raining since dawn. That quiet, steady kind of rain that makes the whole city feel slower than usual. Michael Hartman sat in the back of his black car, staring through the window. Glass streaked with water. The sky is dull and heavy. The kind of morning that made everything feel just a little more distant. The inside of the car was silent. No news. No music. Just the soft swish of the windshield wipers. This was his routine. Same route. Same coffee. Same seat in the office. Everything is in order. Just the way he liked it. But this morning, Jeremy, his assistant, glanced up from the schedule. "Sir," he said gently, "what if we tried somewhere different today? Just for breakfast. Small place. Off the grid." Michael didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him, then gave the smallest nod. One that said fine. Just today. At exactly 8:03 a.m., they turned onto a street most CEOs would never find themselves on. East End. Older part of town. Rows of small shops, uneven sidewalks, peeling paint. A café sat quietly on the corner. It didn't look like much. Just a hand-painted sign and a foggy window. The kind of place people walked past without noticing. Michael stepped out of the car and walked through the door. A soft bell rang overhead. The smell hit him first, warm bread, fresh coffee, and something else. Something hard to name, but easy to feel. The cafe was small. Cozy. No one wore a suit. The walls were covered in black and white photos. The lights were soft. A quiet radio played in the background. A woman behind the counter looked up and smiled. Not the polished, practiced smile he was used to, but a real one. Tired, kind, and familiar. "You look like a croissant guy," she said. Before he could speak, she placed a fresh one on a small plate. "First one's in the house." Her name tag said Rosa. Michael gave a small nod and took a seat by the window. He didn't pull out his phone. Didn't check his emails. Just sat, listening to the rain tapping against the glass. A few tables away, a boy sat alone. Maybe 8, maybe 9. Curly hair. Old sneakers. He wasn't eating or talking. Just drawing quietly in a notebook. His small hands moved slowly, carefully, like the lines mattered. He didn't glance up. Not once. Michael noticed him but said nothing. There was something about the boy's stillness. The kind of quiet that didn't feel empty, it felt deep. At 8:49 a.m., Michael stood to leave. He walked past the boy's table. That's when he saw it, just sitting near the edge. A small, folded piece of paper. The boy nudged it toward him with one finger. Still didn't look up. Michael hesitated, then picked it up and slid it into his coat pocket. No words were exchanged. No questions asked. Outside, the rain was still falling. He walked back to the car. The bell jingled behind him as the cafe door closed. He didn't know why, but as the driver pulled away, he didn't scroll through emails like usual. He just stared out the window, holding on to the silence. That evening, everything in the penthouse was just as he left it. The lights turned on when he walked in. The room was spotless. A single glass sat by the sink. He poured himself a drink. Stood by the window. Looked out over the city. But something was different now. He felt it, even if he couldn't explain it. Not the view. Not the silence. Something smaller. Something folded. Still in his pocket. Still unopened. Have you ever had a moment that felt ordinary on the outside, but stayed with you long after it passed? Maybe a look. A word. or something as small as a folded note. If you were Michael, would you have opened that note right away or waited? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear what you would have done. Friday morning, November 11th, 2022. 6:07 a.m. It was still raining, but softer now, like the sky had finally worn itself out. Michael Hartman stood in his kitchen, still in his robe, holding a half-full coffee cup he hadn't touched. He wasn't looking at the stock market. He wasn't reviewing emails. He was staring at the coat he wore the day before. It hung where it always did, right by the door. Nothing about it looked different, but something inside it was. He stepped forward slowly, reached into the inside pocket, and pulled out the small folded note the boy had left. The edges were still curled. His thumb rested on the crease for a moment before he opened it. No logo. No fancy handwriting. Just 6 words in shaky, almost childlike print. "Sir, today is my birthday. Can I get a hug?" The room stood still. Michael blinked. His hands were trembling slightly, but he didn't notice. He folded the note slowly, almost like it was something fragile. Then, without saying a word, he got dressed. At 7:14 a.m., he stepped into the rain, this time without an umbrella. He arrived at the café before it opened. The windows were still fogged up from the inside. A dim light glowed behind the curtains. By 7:38 a.m., Rosa unlocked the door. She looked surprised to see him, but she didn't ask anything. She just nodded, as if she already knew he wasn't here for coffee. Michael walked in slowly. Same warmth. Same soft music. Same smell of fresh bread. And in the same corner, the boy. Sitting there with his notebook. Drawing. Head down. Shoulders a little hunched. He looked up this time. His eyes met Michael's. No smile. No fear. Just quiet waiting. Michael stood still. The note was in his hand. But he didn't need it anymore. The boy stood up and walked toward him. And without saying a word, opened his arms. Michael didn't hesitate. He bent down. And for the first time in what felt like an entire lifetime, he hugged someone. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't stiff. It was real. The boy leaned into his chest, arms wrapped tightly around his coat. Michael closed his eyes. His own arms held firm, and his breath slowed. A tear rolled down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't need to. That moment didn't fix everything. But it broke something loose. Something that had been buried under years of silence, money, and distance. For the first time in decades, Michael felt warmth in his chest that didn't come from success, but from something far simpler. Connection. Not because of a deal. Not because of a name. Because a child asked for a hug, and meant it. What would you have done if a stranger's note asked for nothing but a hug on their birthday? Would you walk away, or would you stop? Tell us in the comments below. Your story might help someone else open their heart too. Monday, November 14th, 2022. 8:11 a.m. For the third day in a row, Michael Hartman returned to the small cafe on East End. The same corner table. The same bell above the door. The same warm smell of baked bread and coffee. But this time, he wasn't just passing through. Something about this place kept pulling him back. Something that didn't quite make sense on a calendar, but felt like it mattered. He didn't tell his team where he was. He just came, ordered a black coffee and nothing else, and sat. Rosa smiled now when she saw him. It wasn't surprising anymore. It was something closer to understanding. She didn't ask questions. She just brought him the same croissant every time, always warm, always without a word. Across the room, Noah was always there. That was the boy's name. Rosa told him after he asked quietly one morning. "Noah," she said while wiping down a table. "He hasn't spoken since birth. But he's always been sharp. Smarter than I know what to do with, honestly." She spoke like a mother trying to hide the weight in her voice. Michael listened. Really listened. Rosa explained that Noah spent hours sketching, sometimes entire pages of puzzles, gears, machines that didn't exist yet. He had no tutors. No speech therapy. No access to the kind of education his mind clearly craved. But he noticed everything. Felt everything. The kind of kid who picked up sadness the way other kids picked up toys. One afternoon, just before Michael stood to leave, Noah walked over to his table. He didn't say anything. Just placed something on the napkin in front of him. A small sheet from his notebook, torn at the edge. A drawing. It was a man. Alone. Standing under the rain. One hand held a balloon that said just one word. Hug. The figure's shoulders were low. His head tilted down. But the line work, it wasn't sad. It was careful. Thoughtful. Michael looked up, but Noah was already walking back to his seat. Something inside Michael shifted again. It was hard to name, but real. He folded the drawing and tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat. The same place where the first note had been. That evening, Michael skipped his usual dinner meeting. Instead, he went home, sat in silence, and pulled the drawing out again. He stared at it for a long time. It wasn't just art. It was a message. Not loud. Not obvious. But it's true. Somewhere between his world of boardrooms and stock projections, something had cracked open. And through that crack, a boy with no voice had quietly stepped in. And he was beginning to make Michael feel something he hadn't felt in years. Curious. Not about business. Not about numbers. But about a child, and the parts of himself he thought were gone for good. Have you ever met someone who said nothing, but still changed something in you? What did they teach you without saying a word? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. 2:12 p.m. The sun peeked out for the first time in days. Light cut through the windows of the café, falling softly on the corner where Noah sat, same table, same notebook, same quiet focus. But something new was on the table in front of him. A wooden puzzle. Intricate. Twisted. One of those old logic boxes you'd normally find in an expensive store downtown. Michael had left it for him earlier that morning, wrapped in brown paper with no note. He didn't expect much. Maybe curiosity. Maybe nothing. But when he returned that afternoon, Noah was already halfway through it. His small fingers moved with care, not rushing, not guessing, just knowing. 10 minutes later, it clicked open. Michael watched from across the room, eyes fixed. Not on the box, but on the boy. The next day, he brought a different kind of challenge. A coding toy normally used in STEM schools. Noah figured it out in under 20 minutes. Then rebuilt it from memory. Then turned it into something else entirely. Something better. Something his own. Michael began stopping by every day, each time with something new. A Rubik's Cube. A stack of logic riddles. A digital circuit board. Each time, Noah solved them without words. But with eyes that lit up like stars. By Friday, Michael couldn't keep it to himself anymore. That evening, he waited until Rosa was closing up. He walked over carefully. No suit. No driver waiting outside. Just a man standing in a small cafe, holding a folder under his arm. "Rosa," he began, "I'd like to help." He laid the folder on the counter. It held a list of schools, programs, therapists, all prepaid, all top-rated. "He's gifted," Michael said quietly. "I've seen a lot of minds in my lifetime. What he has, it's rare." Rosa didn't smile. She didn't thank him. Instead, she looked down at the folder, then back at Michael with steady eyes. "You people always come with something," she said. She wasn't cold. She wasn't rude. She was just tired. Tired of broken promises. Tired of rich men walking in like they had all the answers. Michael didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He just nodded slowly. "I don't want anything back," he said. "I just want him to have what I never gave my brother." The air went quiet. Then, Noah walked up. He had heard nothing of the conversation, but he saw everything. His eyes moved from Michael to his mother. Then, without a sound, he tugged gently at Rosa's hand. She looked down. Noah nodded. Just once. Toward Michael. That was it. No speeches. No handshakes. Just a child's quiet trust. That night, Rosa made a call to one of the schools. And Michael, for the first time in his life, felt like he had been chosen. Not for his wealth. Not for his title. But for something much smaller. And somehow far more important. Saturday, November 19th, 2022. 6:42 p.m. The cafe had already closed. Chairs were flipped upside down on the tables. The lights inside were dim, just enough to see. Outside, the street was quiet. No more rain. Just the hum of a passing car now and then. Rosa wiped down the last counter while Michael sat near the back, holding a cup of tea he hadn't touched. Noah had gone home early, tired from a full week at his new learning center. It was the first time Michael and Rosa were in the room alone, without rush, without noise. Just silence. And a chance. He didn't plan to speak. Not fully. But silence has a way of making space for things you try to forget. Michael looked at the floor for a long time before his voice came out. "I had a brother," he said finally. "Daniel." His fingers tightened around the cup. He didn't talk either. Not with words. But he had this way of making you feel like you'd just been handed the world with a smile. He paused. A short breath. He was 5 years younger than me. Smart. Funny in his own quiet way. One summer, we went to the lake near our parents' cabin. It was his birthday. Rosa stopped wiping. Slowly turned to face him. Michael kept going. I was supposed to be watching him. I got distracted. I don't even remember by what. Maybe a bird. Maybe my own thoughts. He slipped. Fell into the water. I didn't notice until it was too late. His voice cracked, but he didn't stop. He couldn't call for help. And when they pulled him out, it was already done. The silence after was heavy but not cold. Rosa walked over, sat across from him. No pity in her eyes. Just stillness. "You know," she said softly, "you're not trying to fix the past. That's never how this works." She leaned back slightly, arms folded. "Maybe helping this boy, maybe that's your second chance. Not to erase what happened, but to build something new from it." Michael looked up, his eyes wet but steady. He didn't speak again that night. He didn't need to. The next morning, he picked Noah up from the learning center himself. No chauffeur. No press. Just him. And from that day on, he didn't just stop by the cafe with puzzles. He started bringing books. Simple ones at first. Then more advanced. He watched Noah solve, create, learn. But more than that, he started talking to him. Not expecting answers. Just sharing. One afternoon, he placed 2 blank circuit boards on the table. "Let's build something," he said. Noah didn't smile. But his hands reached out eager. And there, between wires and plastic, the first layer of trust was built. Not forced. Not loud. But real. And this time, Michael didn't turn his back. Monday, November 21st, 2022. 9:12 a.m. The first article appeared on a gossip blog most people only read on the subway. A blurry photo. Michael Hartman exiting the cafe. The headline read, "Billionaire CEO spotted in deli-style cafe for 4th day straight. Is love brewing or is he breaking down?" No facts. Just speculation. But in a world fueled by clicks, it didn't take long for the story to grow teeth. The next day, another headline. Tech tycoons visit spark rumors. Secret family or sudden breakdown? By Wednesday, the whispers had made it to the top floor of Virexon. The same boardroom where Michael once signed billion-dollar deals now echoed with doubt. "Michael," one partner said, carefully choosing his words, "people are asking questions." Another chimed in, "You've built a public image for 2 decades. We can't risk it all because of charity distractions." Michael didn't flinch, but something in his face shifted. The quiet warmth that had slowly begun returning to his voice these past few weeks, it faded. He stopped going to the cafe. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. At the cafe, Rosa noticed first. She didn't say anything. She just looked at the empty chair by the window every morning. Noah, though he said nothing, kept drawing, but less. Shorter sessions. Less color. Fewer pages. One afternoon, he waited until the cafe closed. Then placed a folded sketch on the chair where Michael used to sit. It was a simple drawing. A man with a briefcase, walking away. A small boy in the corner, hand still raised. Waiting. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Michael stared at his reflection in the window again. City lights blinking behind him. Phone buzzing with messages from legal. PR advisors drafting statements. His inbox flooded with damage control. But all he could think about was a boy who hadn't said a single word, yet managed to make him feel seen. And now unseen. That week, stockholders called for a special meeting. Lawyers circled. "Distance yourself," they said. The cafe. The boy. The mother. Everything. Before it looks like more. And so, for the first time since Noah's note, Michael stayed away. Fully. Physically. Emotionally. But something in him couldn't settle. The work didn't feel the same. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt hollow. And deep down, where memories never die, the words of Rosa came back. Maybe helping this boy is your second chance. But for now, he had turned his back on that chance. And Noah, still mute, had gone quiet in a new kind of way. Friday, November 25th, 2022. 4:18 p.m. The cafe was quiet. Too quiet. Noah sat by the window like he always did, sketchpad open, pencil in hand. But the pages looked different now. The drawings had changed. Less color. Less space. More shadows. He didn't draw trees or balloons anymore. He drew a chair. Empty. A cup of coffee left untouched. A hand reaching but never met. Rosa noticed. She watched her son sit still, eyes always drifting toward the front door, as if waiting for someone he wasn't sure would return. And day after day, the bell never rang. Sunday morning, Rosa did something she hadn't done in years. She went to Midtown. She stood in front of Verexen's main building, glass walls that reflected the world outside, but never let it in. At 9:06 a.m., Michael stepped out with two men in suits. He was dressed in dark gray, briefcase in hand, face unreadable. When he saw Rosa, he froze. The others kept walking. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked him in the eye. "You don't have to fix him," she said. "You don't have to be some hero. But he waits every day. That boy who barely talks, you made him feel chosen. And now he sits by the door, wondering if he imagined it all." Michael said nothing. His lips parted like he wanted to explain, but no words came. Just the usual silence. Rosa didn't push. She turned and left. That night, just after 11 p.m., Michael returned home. The elevator dinged softly, opening into the same silent penthouse. But this time, there was something on the floor. A package. No return label. Just his name. In a child's handwriting. He brought it inside, set it down gently, and unwrapped it. Inside was a drawing. It showed two figures, one tall, one small. They were holding hands under a sky full of stars. Above them, a red balloon floated upward with one word written across it. Family. Michael stared at it for a long time. Longer than he'd stared at any stock report, any investor deck, any award speech. He sat down on the floor beside it, and for the first time in years, he let himself cry. Not because of guilt, not because of loss, but because for the first time, he realized what it meant to be missed. And somewhere in that quiet moment, something in him made a decision. Monday, November 28th, 2022. 7:52 a.m. The bell above the cafe door jingled. Rosa looked up from behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour. At first, she thought it was a regular, but then she saw the figure standing in the doorway, soaked from the morning drizzle, holding a familiar folded piece of paper in his hand. Michael Hartman. He didn't walk in with security. No cameras. No attention. Just him. And something in his face had changed. Not just tired. Not just serious. Softer. More sure. Rosa didn't speak right away. She just stared, unsure if he was really there. Michael stepped forward slowly, then stopped a few feet from the counter. He looked down, swallowed, and then looked up at her. "I let fear rob me of joy once," he said quietly, "and I'm not going to do that again." She didn't need to ask what he meant. Across the cafe, Noah looked up. He didn't run. He didn't wave. He just watched, wide-eyed, as Michael walked over and gently placed the same drawing, the one with the red balloon, on the table between them. Then, with no words, Michael reached out. Noah stood and wrapped his arms around him. By noon, headlines were already changing. Not because of leaks or gossip, but because Michael had called the press himself. At 2 p.m. sharp, he stepped onto a small stage outside the Verexen building. Cameras clicked. Reporters held out recorders. But there were no bullet points. No corporate talk. Just a folded note in his pocket and something new in his voice. "I've spent the last 25 years building things. Apps. Systems. Companies. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to build something that really matters." He paused, looked at the crowd, then continued. "So as of today, I'm stepping down as CEO of Verexen. I'm not retiring. I'm just changing direction." The microphones picked up every word, every breath. "I'm starting something new, the Noah Hartman Foundation. A program that will support gifted kids who don't have access, who don't have a voice in the places that make decisions. Kids like Noah, who changed me more than any stock ever did. Some clapped. Some didn't know how to react. But the cameras stayed on him. He stepped away without answering questions. The press tried to follow, but he didn't give them more. He didn't need to. The story had already been told by a boy who barely spoke and a man who finally did. That night, a new headline made its way across the country. Billionaire walks away from empire to follow a drawing. Tuesday, December 13th, 2022. 10:15 a.m. New York Family Court. Room 204. The air was still. The judge read the final papers slowly, her voice calm but certain. Sitting to her left, Rosa held Noah's hand. On the right, Michael sat in silence, heart pounding harder than any boardroom speech he'd ever given. The paperwork was simple, but the meaning behind it was everything. When she finally looked up and said, "The court approves the petition for adoption," Michael didn't speak. He just looked at Noah. And for the first time, the boy looked back with a full smile. Not wide, not loud, but steady, secure. That same week, Rosa took her new position at the Noah Hartman Foundation. Her title wasn't flashy, Director of Community Food Programs, but the meaning was rich. She redesigned the kitchen herself. No waste. Local farms. No child goes home hungry. She wore an apron with Noah's first drawing stitched into the fabric, 2 people under an umbrella. And Noah, he was no longer sitting in the back of cafés drawing rain. He was now seated in a bright classroom surrounded by other gifted students just like him. A place where silence wasn't a weakness, but a space to grow. He learned to use a voice app. The first sentence he typed into it wasn't hello or thank you. It was I'm safe now. His new teachers cried. A quiet montage followed over the next few months. Noah is building a solar robot, presenting a group project, laughing, actually laughing, as he programmed lights to blink to the beat of his favorite songs. He didn't talk, not with his voice. But he spoke. Loud, clear, and often. He spoke through circuits, through colors, through typed-out poems. At home, dinner was no longer quiet. It was calm. Laughter didn't fill the room, but warmth did. Michael stopped checking stocks during meals. Rosa made too much food on purpose. Noah started drawing in color again. Reds, blues, yellows, and always somewhere in the picture a balloon. They went to the planetarium one Saturday night. Michael showed Noah the star he and his brother used to make wishes on. Noah reached for Michael's hand and held it all through the show. He never let go. They weren't a project. They weren't a news story anymore. They were a family. The kind you don't plan for, but the kind that holds. Friday, December 8th, 2023. 11:42 a.m. Inside the Assembly Hall of Brookhaven Academy for Gifted Learners, rows of folding chairs filled up fast. Cameras clicked, parents whispered. There was a buzz in the air, but one chair in the front row sat still, its seat reserved for someone who hadn't missed a single parent meeting since last spring. Michael Hartman sat quietly, both hands resting on his knees. No tie, no suit, just a navy sweater Rosa had picked for him, and a heart beating fast for reasons that had nothing to do with business. On stage, behind a curtain, Noah waited with a group of classmates. His project table had no flashy lights, no spinning wheels, just a small robot shaped like a soft animal, with eyes that blinked and a chest that gently rose and fell like it was breathing. The concept was simple. A companion for kids like him, silent kids. Kids who wanted to speak but couldn't, or who chose quiet because the world didn't feel safe enough to hear them. The curtain lifted. One by one, the children presented. When it was Noah's turn, the lights dimmed. He stepped forward, small hands resting on the table. His speech device hung by a strap around his shoulder. There were no nerves on his face. Just calm. A quiet knowing. He tapped the device. The words came out one by one. Measured. Brave. This is Milo. Pause. He listens without rushing you. Another pause. He speaks softly when you're scared. Longer pause. He helped me practice something. I want to try it now with no help. He reached under the table, clicked something into the robot. A soft chime played. Noah looked at Michael. Eyes steady. And then, through the microphone, not through the device, not through a screen, Noah spoke his first clear sentence aloud. To the man who gave me my first hug, thank you for choosing me. Gasps broke across the room. Then clapping. But Michael didn't hear the crowd. He was already standing. A tear rolled down his cheek, same side it did the day of the note. He clapped slowly, then faster. Rosa leaned her head on his shoulder. The camera lingers on the applause. On Noah's face. On the soft blinking eyes of the robot beside him. Back at Michael's office. Books stacked beside toy blueprints and scribbled notes from Noah. In a silver frame on his desk sits a worn-out piece of folded paper. Still creased, still stained from the rain. One sentence in blue marker. Sir, today is my birthday. Can I get a hug? Some stories don't begin with a loud voice. Some begin in silence. Some begin with a folded note. And sometimes one hug can change two lives. If this story moved you, share it with someone you love. A friend. A parent. A child who might need to hear it. Sometimes, all it takes is a small act to remind someone they matter. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more true stories that speak to the heart. Your share could be the start of someone else's healing.